Hello and welcome back to the Wasteland, everybody. Welcome back to Fallout, where today we're going to be talking about each of the Fallout games. I'm going to be ranking them in this tier list as to which ones I enjoy the most, because I haven't actually went over all the Fallout games before in a tier list setting like this, and I have been asked quite a bit for this. We're also going to be talking about which of these Fallouts is going to be the best one for you to hop into if you're brand new to the Fallout series. I know a lot of people are getting into Fallout now because of the Fallout TV show, which is awesome. I love Fallout, so it's really cool to have more people joining in Fallout. Let's go over the tiers real quick, where we have our Wasteland Classics at the very top. These are the top tier Fallout games in my opinion. Then we've got the Nuka-Cola tier, very solid options for Fallout games. Usually have something that's maybe setting them aside from the other games, but might have one or two issues with it. Then we have the Vault Dweller tier. This is going to be kind of like the middle tier. That's still decent games, that still can be pretty fun, but might have some limitations to them. Then we have the Janky tier. Kind of all the Fallout games could fall into the Janky tier, because they are all pretty janky. But these ones are either extra janky for reasons that we'll get into, or they're going to not be for everybody in one way or another. And then we have the question mark tier, which these are the Fallout games that I have not played. So let's go over the question mark tier really quick with the games that I haven't played, because I don't have very much to say about them. So Brotherhood of Steel is going to be the first one on here, which I've never played the Brotherhood of Steel game. It feels like most people have not played this game, and from what I've heard from everybody that has played this game, it's nothing memorable. It's a pretty bland and boring game. Maybe there's a couple of things about it that could be a little bit redeeming, but this was like a PlayStation 2 or a PlayStation 1 game that came out that I wasn't even aware was part of the game. It's never been remastered to be put into anywhere else. You can't get it anywhere else as far as I'm aware, unless you have like an emulator, I'm assuming, to play this, or you actually want to get the physical copy and then get a PlayStation 1 or PlayStation 2, whichever one it was for, to actually pop it in, which for a game like this unremarkable and that's kind of looked down upon by the Fallout community that has played it, you can probably just skip this one and act like it doesn't exist. I don't think anybody would blame you. Then we have Fallout Shelter, which I have played a little bit. This is the mobile Fallout game. I only played this for a short amount of time. It wasn't for me. I don't really play mobile games. I'm not the biggest fan of them, so it's just the one that I've played like the least. I technically played it, but not very much, and I can't really say. I'm also just going to have a bias against like the mobile games anyway, because like I said, most of them I don't play. I played like a handful of them, or I've played a handful of them, and currently don't really play any of them. And then the big one is Fallout 76 and all the versions of Fallout 76 or all the DLCs for it. I have not played any of Fallout 76, although I have heard that it has gotten better over time and that it is a fun game to hop in with friends, which I don't doubt that at all. Friends make everything better, and Fallout 76 I'm sure is no exception to that. So now that we've gotten those out of the way, let's talk about the Fallout games that I have played, which are the first one, second one, Tactics, 3, New Vegas, and 4. So starting with the very first Fallout, do you want to go all the way back to the very first Fallout? And I would say maybe. I'm going to put the very first Fallout into the Vault Dweller tier, because this one can be a pretty solid enough game if you're into this style of game. These don't look like the more modern Fallouts. These are not first-person shooters. These are top-down RPGs with a lot more RPG elements to them than other games. Sometimes these can be RTS games in the case of Tactics, but in the regular Fallout, I believe that it is only in turn-based. So this is where Fallout actually starts out. And there is a decent amount of world building in Fallout 1. Now, there's not as much as we'll get into later games, and Fallout 1 is a very short game by comparison to the other games. Your first playthrough of Fallout 1, assuming that you don't run out of time trying to find the water chip, is probably going to only take you about 8 or 9 hours in total. It's probably not going to be that long unless you do want to get the water chip, run and explore areas, and then hopefully beat the master, because you can lose the game that way too. These games are timed, at least Fallout 1 and Fallout 2, so you do have a timetable that you have to stick to. The good news about Fallout 1, 2, and Tactics is that even though they are PC games and you can only really play them on PC as far as I'm aware, I don't know of any console ports for these, they will run on basically anything. I mean, the first Fallout game came out in 1999, so if you have even a reasonably okay laptop, or a reasonably okay, even if it's an old desktop, it should be able to play these just fine. I know that because I used to have a lot of old laptops. That's how I actually got into PC gaming, and they couldn't run modern games at all. So I had to go back and play older games like Fallout 1, Fallout 2, and Fallout Tactics, which they ran perfectly fine on. So you shouldn't have any problem there. I do remember there being some jankiness with the old Fallout games though. Sometimes the screens would go kind of weird. Sometimes there would be artifacting on there. It is just something up with the game. It usually changes on the loading screens, and I've never actually had a problem booting up Fallout 1 or Fallout 2 or Tactics for that matter. So would I recommend Fallout 1 if you just want to get right into the Fallout game? If you want to start from the very beginning, sure. It's a pretty decent game at that. You can find guides on this pretty easy. Some things are a little bit confusing, but you can figure them out pretty quickly. There's not a whole lot of depth to the very first Fallout game, although there is multiple playstyles you can do, and I do like the way that luck and unique encounters work in the older games, more so than in the later games. But the very first Fallout game is okay enough. Now let's move on to Fallout 2, which I think Fallout 2 is much better than Fallout 1. This one is going to go right up into Wasteland Classics. Fallout 2, I think, is actually the best of the old school style of Fallout games, best of the classic games. This one has a lot of Fallout lore in it. It has a lot of world building in it. This is where we first see the Enclave. This is where we first see the NCR actually taking hold. The NCR is technically in the first one, but they don't really stick around. Well, they're not really made until the second one. We get to see the aftermath of all the super mutants, where we defeated the Master in that, so we get some more world building on them. We did get to see ghouls in the very first Fallout, but they weren't really fleshed out as much as they are in Fallout 2. So we get to see more of the Brotherhood in this. The Brotherhood is not very prominent in Fallout 1. This one, I think, has some of the best quests in the classic Fallouts as well. You get to see a lot of characters that will be returning in other games, particularly in New Vegas. So there's a lot going on with Fallout 2, and I think it's all around just a straight upgrade from the very first Fallout. The main problem with this one is just going to be the play style of it. If you don't like old school turn-based RPGs like this, you don't like this art style, you're probably not going to like Fallout 2, although I do think Fallout 2 is one of the best games that kind of nails this sort of style. Fallout Tactics, I think I'm going to put into the janky tier. And Fallout Tactics is a little bit underrated in my opinion. Now this one is definitely not going to be for everybody. This one is the least RPG of the Fallout games. There's not a whole lot of RPG elements to this. This is very similar to other tactics games, similar like Final Fantasy Tactics and a few others, where this is either a turn-based or an RTS style top-down game, where you are playing as one of the characters. This is the warrior in this game, and you can build them however you'd like, just like you can in any of the Fallout games, but you're also building a team around them. So you can have up to 5 people join you in this squad, and you pretty much always want 5 people in the squads when you're playing this, because XP is given out equally to everybody, so just having more people makes more sense. Fallout Tactics by default is set to RTS mode, which is extremely difficult for you to actually play. I find that mode to be insanely hard to actually manage, because you have to account for all enemies moving around, and you're trying to coordinate 6 people moving around while you're still managing the action points that you have, because action points in the old games are actually all of your points that you use for any sort of combat, or even non-combat things like getting into your bag, using stim packs, moving across the map, shooting guns at things, changing positions from standing, crouched, or prone, switching weapons, reloading weapons, taking aimed shots, or taking just fast shots with the weapon, firing in bursts. There's a lot of things going on and things that you will need to switch up just on the fly, and playing that with 6 people is extremely difficult. Playing it with 1 person while still fighting enemies is very difficult, but playing it with 6 is basically impossible, at least for somebody like me. I'm sure there's somebody that can do it, but I certainly can't. Tactics is also one of the more difficult Fallout games, if I'm being honest, because there are just some outright like BS missions in this game, where if you don't know how to either cheese them, or you don't know the strategy for taking them on, and you're not willing to like save or save scum throughout this, Tactics can be really brutal. Like, some of the missions are insanely difficult, especially with how much the difficulty can jump up in between missions, where you might go on one mission where it's just fight a bunch of raiders, no problem. Next mission, go protect a bunch of people as you try to move across the map. There's a lot of friendly fire in this game too, so NPCs might just run right in front of your lines of fire. You might not even realize that there's certain enemies hidden in certain areas. There's just a lot that can go wrong, and if any of your characters die in this game, that's it, they're dead. You don't get them back. You can't re-recruit them, you can't bring them back to life. It isn't usually game over unless everybody dies, or your main character dies in this. But even then, your main character can die pretty easily, like you didn't check the ground where a mine was, you stepped on it and blew yourself up, or a super mutant decided to nuke you from across the map with a missile launcher. Those things can happen in this game, and it's pretty brutal sometimes. It can be a pretty fun game, though. Tactics is also not technically considered canon in the Fallout universe either. which kind of makes sense because this does actually span the largest area in Fallout, where Fallout 1 and 2 actually take place in California, pretty close to one another. Fallout Tactics takes place all across the Midwest of the US, where you're going from Brotherhood Bunker to Brotherhood Bunker. And the cool thing about all of these classic games is that you can get them on Steam just in a complete bundle. Usually the bundle's only a couple of dollars, like you can get it for like $2. And at least for Fallout 2, that's totally worth it. Fallout 1 and Tactics may not be for everybody, but I think 2 is definitely worth going for. Fallout 3, I'm going to put into the Nuka-Cola tier. I think Fallout 3 is a fantastic game. This was actually my very first Fallout that I ever played. It's a lot of people's first Fallouts. It was the very first-person Fallout as well, and it hits on quite a few points that are pretty good for Fallout. There is still quite a few issues with this. So let's talk about the good, and then we'll talk about the bad. The good about Fallout is that this one is pretty accessible. It's pretty easy to get into. It's also, in my opinion, the easiest Fallout if you put it to the highest difficulty. The older Fallouts are much more difficult than this on the very hard mode. This one is probably the easiest, mostly because this doesn't really make enemies hit you any harder. It just makes enemies tankier. There's a decent amount of weapons here. There's actually quite a few good side quests on here. The main quest is fine for Fallout 3. It's nothing way crazy, and we'll see it repeated again in Fallout 4. So this one can be super fun to do multiple playthroughs on. You do get more lore in Fallout 3 too, since this is the very first Fallout that is on the East Coast. This is taking place in DC, and you also have all the DLCs that go along with Fallout 3, which some of them are quite good. You have Operation Anchorage, which is a decent DLC. It's kind of fun to run through. You can get some extra gear that's pretty strong. You have The Pit, which is kind of a buggy mess at times, but it is probably my favorite of the Fallout 3 DLCs. It has the best story to it, has the best characters in it. You have Broken Steel, which is an extension of Fallout 3's main story, which is fine. It's not really my favorite, but it is kind of cool that you can continue playing, and it does add more enemies and it does add more levels, which is pretty awesome. You have Point Lookout, which is a fantastic DLC. That one is probably also one of my favorites. Really cool location. I don't really care for the main story all that much, but it has some really good side stories to it, which is really good, and a lot of fun places to explore. And then you also have Mothership Zeta. That one's the Alien DLC. Sometimes it's fun to run through, other times it can get a little bit tedious. Depends on how many times you've played the game. I've played these games a lot. There are some downsides to Fallout 3 though. One of them is that you can't really ADS with guns unless you have scopes on them, which is kind of annoying. The gunplay in Fallout 3 doesn't feel that good. VATS is really strong in Fallout 3. Kind of for a reason. Unarmed and melee is also really strong, and shotguns are unbelievably overpowered in Fallout 3. So it does have some balancing issues there. It can be really buggy at certain places throughout the game. It can be particularly buggy in like the Pit DLC. There's a lot of areas where you can just fall through the map and you might need to reload this, especially if you're playing this on consoles. I don't believe that was ever fixed. You can get patches to fix it if you're playing on PC. You can also just no-clip out of areas so that you don't get stuck in areas like that on PC, which is good. And this game is pretty abysmal if you buy it on Steam. That is one of the biggest downsides to Fallout 3, is that most people are going to be buying this through Steam. And it doesn't really work on Steam. It doesn't work with later versions of Windows. For one reason or another, it just was never fixed in Fallout 3, or wasn't fixed completely, so you probably are going to have to mod this ahead of time to actually get Fallout 3 working normally. Which, that's kind of annoying. That's probably going to take you a couple hours. There are plenty of tutorial videos that you can look up on YouTube. That's always what I have to do whenever I want to play Fallout 3, and when I've uninstalled it from my computer and reinstall it back. Or when my mods have crashed it and I have to reinstall it anyway. Fallout 3 doesn't play well there. So if you are going to get Fallout 3, I would recommend that you get it from GOG. GOG, it actually just runs normally from all that I've heard. That's good. You can just play it right there, and you can still install mods. That's also another big bonus to Fallout 3, as well as 4 and New Vegas, is that mods are accessible. Then we have New Vegas, which New Vegas is also going to go up into the Wasteland Classics. I think this is the best Fallout game that we've had so far. This is my absolute favorite Fallout game. It has a lot going for it. It also has some of the jankiness that was in Fallout 3, because this is built on the same engine as Fallout 3. Although if you do buy this on Steam, it usually runs. I've heard some accounts of it not running right away, so you might need to mod it, and it's not super optimized for newer PCs or later operating systems, so it might need some mods in order to get it to work. However, there are quite a few videos on how to do this, and quite a few like vanilla friendly mods to where they just up your performance so that your game runs better. It has a lot of really good characters. It has a pretty good main story as well as a branching main story, which is pretty awesome, to where you can kind of pick whatever you'd like. It has some of the best DLCs. I think it arguably has the best overall DLCs in any of the Fallout games because they are all very solid. where you have dead money, which is fantastic, although it's very annoying for new players and very difficult for new players. Honest Hearts, which has an amazing map and an amazing main character that really carries it. A little bit lacking on some of the other aspects in that DLC. You have Old World Blues, which is just fantastic all the way around. Very fun area, very cool, very sci-fi, very Fallout. And then you also have the Lonesome Road, which is a very proper conclusion to New Vegas, and it's really cool how all these DLCs tie into the main story. And this one does have better gunplay than Fallout 3, although it is still running the same engine, but at least you can aim down sights with it, you can shoot normally in this, so VATS isn't such a crutch in this. Basically every fighting style is viable in New Vegas. This is also probably one of the hardest Fallouts in the game if you want to crank it up to the very hard hardcore mode. Give yourself a little bit of a challenge. There definitely are builds and ways that you can get around it not being super difficult. I mean, I recently installed a mod that was a 10 times enemy spawn, and we did a run with that on New Vegas. That was really fun. That made it so explosive weapons were way more handy than they otherwise would be in the game, even though they can be quite good. New Vegas has so much going for it, and I think it is the best of the Fallout games. It's my personal favorite, and it's the one that I go back and play the most. It's the one that I mod the most. I absolutely love this one. I'm 100% biased towards it, but I absolutely love it. And then we have Fallout 4, which Fallout 4 I'm also going to put in the Nuka-Cola tier. I think I'm going to put it above 3. Fallout 4 would be the game that I'd recommend for anybody getting into the Fallout games. The main reason why is that this is the most modern Fallout besides Fallout 76. It has the most modern controls. It actually has pretty good gunplay in it. The gunplay in Fallout 4 is pretty nice. Maybe not all of the guns themselves, because some of them are kind of janky and weird, but Fallout 4 does do at least the gun combat the best. There are still quite a few issues that I have with Fallout 4 though. The main story is the same as it is in 3, which is kind of disappointing, and it is lacking quite a bit. Side quests can also be lacking sometimes, especially with certain factions where you have like infinite recycling quests. The infinite recycling fetch quests are just kind of boring. You know, go to another settlement, fight off whatever it is there, come back, talk to Preston so you can go and do it again. You have that, and you have that with every single faction. You do have multiple factions that you could side with, and there is quite a few interesting side content that's going on here. Some of the side characters are decent. Fallout 4 doesn't have my favorite characters in it, but some of them can be pretty good. Mostly the synths, funny enough. This one also takes place on the East Coast, similar to Fallout 3, where this time you're in Boston, so there is some returning characters from Fallout 3 that we've seen before. This one is also probably the easiest to mod out of the Fallout games, because this one will just run normally, which is good. It'll run normally on all the modern hardware. You don't need to mod it, but if you would like to mod it, you absolutely can, and there are a lot of mods that are being made for Fallout 4 and still continuing being made with Fallout 4, as well as this one has gotten the most recent new gen update, which I've been playing a bit, and I have found it to be pretty fun. Although sometimes a little bit janky, but that's kind of to be expected with any of the Fallout games. It does actually have one of the best DLCs, probably the best DLC out of any of the Fallout games, I will say that about 4. Far Harbor is a fantastic DLC and arguably outshines just the regular Fallout 4 game. It has a much better main storyline, it has much better side content, it's a much more memorable place than the rest of the wasteland that we see in Fallout 4. Even though I do like exploring Fallout 4, it is probably one of my favorite Fallout games to just wander around and get lost in. So this is where I put all the Fallout games on my tier list. Again, I would recommend that you probably start out with Fallout 4. If you're getting right into the Fallout series and you watch the TV show and you want to hop in and you want to play stuff like that, pick up Fallout 4 and put it on like the normal difficulty. If you find normal to be too easy, bump it up to the hard difficulty or bump it up to the very hard difficulty. If you want more of a challenge, you can bump it all the way up to the survival difficulty and try a run with that. If you play through Fallout 4 and you're really liking the Fallout series and you think that this one's a good one, then you can kind of start with quite a few other ones if you'd like to go there. You could go back and play Fallout 3 next. That would be another first-person game if you really like that aspect and you don't want to go back to the turn-based top-down view of the older games. Fallout 3 would probably be my next one that I'd recommend, just so that you get some more backstory. You can kind of run through this one pretty easily, especially if you're just putting it on the normal difficulty. If you want the easiest Fallout experience, Fallout 3 is probably the one to go with, and then just keep it on the normal difficulty. Build up a VATS build, because that's what a lot of perks kind of incentivize you to do in that game. And you'll probably have a pretty good time running through Fallout 3. You'll probably enjoy a lot of the quests. The main quest is pretty decent. And then move on to New Vegas. I think New Vegas is the best, but it can also be kind of the most difficult out of the more modern games. If you want to go all the way back and start out at the very start of the Fallout games, then I would highly recommend you just start out with the very first Fallout game, run through it, see if you enjoy it. If so, or even if you're a little bit iffy about it, go on to Fallout 2. Fallout 2, I would say, is just better overall at everything than Fallout 1. It's a good choice overall. but may not be for everybody, especially with the style that it has and the play that it does. If you're really into Fallout and you really like those old school games, then try out Tactics. I wouldn't really recommend you just jump into Tactics right away. I think that would be kind of a mistake compared to the other Fallout games. I think Tactics should probably be one that you are already comfortable with, like you've played Fallout 1 and 2 and you're hopping into Tactics, or you're going to be playing through all the Fallout games in order or something like that, in which case then you might really enjoy Tactics, or you might find it to be kind of the bump in the road compared to the other games. And then if you have friends and you want to play the most modern game, then try 76. I can't say if it's good or not because I haven't played it. Tell me your thoughts on the Fallout games, where you would rank them. Thank you guys so very much for watching this, and if you did watch the TV show and you're playing the Fallout games now, congratulations and welcome to the Wasteland. Hope that you have a very fun adventure out there. Drink some Nuka-Cola or some Sunset Sarsaparilla, depending on where you're at. Or even some Vim. Yeah, get some Vim in you. And I'll catch you guys next time. Bye-bye, everyone.